Okay, and welcome to this tutorial. This is the first ever tutorial from me on Substance Designer, which is an amazing program made by Allegorithmic, and it's a node-based texture creation software. Absolutely brilliant piece of software. So let's go. So what I'm going to do is I've just opened Substance Designer up. I'm going to open a new substance. I'm just going to call this. I call it oil barrel tut because I've had a go at this before. In terms of the size, we can change this later actually, so we don't need to mess about with this. What I'll do is I'll keep it 1K for now, just with the screen capture going. In terms of the template, because I'm creating this to go into Unreal Engine 4, I'm going to use a physically based metallic roughness map or method. So, okay, everything else is good to go. So what this does is it brings up our interface. I'm not going to go too much into the basics of Substance Designer just because there's loads of fantastic information out there, particularly on the Allegorithmic YouTube channel and their website. Lots of good stuff out there, so I'll really just get into using this for a particular purpose. So for this particular thing, I'm actually going to bring in a mesh that I created in Maya and just save this out as an OBJ. Just going to drag and drop this in, and this is going to give me my resource, which is it's just a simple oil barrel, and I'm going to drag this over into my 3D window, and this is going to bring this up. So I'm just using the mouse rollerball to zoom in and out, middle mouse to pan, and left click to rotate around this object. Okay, so let's get going. The recommendations from most people using Subdesigner, from most of the kind of people that I've watched that really seem to know what they're doing, is to start off using or start creating essentially the 3D elements for the texture. So in these cases, the normal maps, height maps if you're using them, not particularly using this a height map for this particular thing, and even the roughness, which is kind of working on the micro surface. After that's done, then we can concentrate on doing the colors. So I'm going to start off doing a normal map for this. So I'm going to start off with some noise generators, if I could spell noise, and I'm just going to use I'm going to use a particular grunge map, so I'm just going to use this one. So if we drag this in, we double click on it, we can actually see it in our window. Okay, so I'm going to use this. I'm also going to create, kind of creating a bit of a grungy metal texture to this. So I'm going to give it some finer detail. I'm going to use, let's have a look, maybe a fractal sum. I'm going to use a fractal sum 1. And what I'm going to do is blend these two together. So I'm going to use a blend mode. We can get this from here, or we can press space and we can bring up our blend mode. Again, I'm just middle mouse rollerball on this and middle mouse hold down to pan. So I'm going to drag this one into the top, this one into the middle. Double click on this, and then what I actually think I'll do is I'm going to just do a copy of this. I'm just going to blend this out. I'll see how far we need that to go in a second. Okay. At any point we can middle mouse drag this on, but what I'll do is I'll create a normal map out of this first of all, and then I'll check how it's going. So to do this, we can just use our normal map node, drag that, and this will convert grayscale information into a normal map. It's a bit easier to see this if I just switch off the transparency on this. I can kind of see how that's working. And then what I can do is right mouse click drag over to the model, and then just plug this into our normal map. And there we have our normal map on there. Now this is a bit rough right now, so what I am going to do is just go into my intensity, and I'm just going to turn this down a little bit. I can actually do that in two ways. I could do that by turning down the intensity. What I could also do is, if I just highlight this string between these two, or this wire, we could add a levels in there. Okay, and then what I could do with the level is just kind of tone this down a little bit as well, and that's going to give us the same kind of effect. In this instance though, this is creating another node, and every one of these nodes will add time. If you were using this in real time within a game, there is a substance plugin within Unreal that would add time to the processing. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to plug this straight into the normal, and as I did earlier, I'm just going to take the intensity down on this, just make this a bit more subtle. What I may actually do is take this one, and I may add a levels to this actually, just to tone this one down a little bit. Just to take out some of the contrast on that. Maybe have something like that. Okay, so it's just a subtle thing, just to create a bit of micro surface on this. Okay. I'm going to deal with as I'm not doing a height map, so I'm going to deal with the roughness now. And actually with the roughness, I'm going to start off with this. So essentially what I'd want to have is these areas where we have this extra sort of detail to be rougher areas, almost where it's had some kind of impact or some kind of damage on the surface. It's dulled the shininess of the surface itself. So I'm going to let's first of all actually just get a uniform colour. I'm just going to make this kind of a mid-grey. Okay, I'm going to add a blend node onto this. And then what I'll do with that is I'll just deal with this in a second. Now, we have a problem here. And you can see this, we've got this red line, which means we have an issue. So this is a grayscale image, this is a grayscale image. What we need to do with this is have two grayscales going together. So what I can do is just go into this, the uniform color, just turn it into a grayscale information, and then we can actually have those working together and blending together. Otherwise you may have problems with that. Okay, so maybe something like that. Again, just so I can see this, I'm just going to right click, drag, and I'm going to plug this into the roughness. What I'm going to do with this is add a levels. And again, because I added this one onto the object, I need to get this one actually. Let's right click on this and do the same. Let's just drag this into the roughness. So wherever we have black, we have more shine. So I don't want this too shiny, but I want a bit of kind of shininess on that. Okay. So maybe just something like that. The roughness map is just kind of broken up, so it's not just a mid grey. We have a bit of randomness on there as well. And the nice thing about the levels is we can actually control the amount of roughness we have on there. Okay. Just to make this a little bit neater, I'm just going to add some frames to this. So the way we can do this, I'm just going to grab this stuff here, which is all pertaining to the normal map. Let's right click and let's add a frame, and then just let's call this normal. Let's grab this over here, right click, add a frame, let's call this roughness. Make it a bit easier to work with. Okay. Let's move my outputs out of the way for a second. So what I'm going to do now is work on the colour. Just press space. I'm just going to get a uniform colour. What I actually want to do with this is I'm going to create I want two colours on this actually, so I'm going to create a mask. I don't know if I can go in and do this. Here we go. So I'm just looking at my UVs here, and what I want to do is create a mask that kind of masks out this area here, so I can put a different colour on the bottom and the top of this barrel, and then have a separate colour in the middle. So just to give myself a visual reference to this, I'm actually going to bake out some materials for this particular thing. So I'm just going to go into the oil barrel, my mesh, and I'm just going to right click and go into the bake model information. So if I can just delete on these, actually, I'm not sure. There we go. Just get rid of all of these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some maps to bake here. So I'm going to choose ambient occlusion map from mesh. I'm going to choose a curvature. I'm going to have a world space normals, and I'm going to have a position map as well. I'm also going to use these later on, maybe in the second part of this tutorial, to create and to generate masks from the actual baked textures. But this will give me an ambient occlusion, which will be useful for me to be able to see which parts of these I want to create the mask on. It just makes it a bit easier for myself, for me to see. So I'm going to set an output size of 2048 by 2048 using the basic UV set, and I'm just going to bring in essentially just bring in my oil barrel mesh again. So if I do this from resource, there I have my mesh, and I can just OK. And with all that in, I'm just going to set this, because I already have one. So I'm just going to go in and just make a new folder. Baked, select that folder, and then I'm going to click OK. So now we have our baked maps. And I'm going to take the ambient occlusion and just drag this in. And I say this is just as a visual reference for myself right now, so I can see where these things are. Okay. So what I want on this is I'm going to create a black mask with a white stripe across it, essentially. So I'm going to take this uniform node. I'm going to make sure that I have this in color, and I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to grab this, I'm going to copy, Control C, Control V, and I'm going to take this, set it above, and with this I'm going to change the color to white. There we go. I'm going to blend these two together. Okay, so we're just seeing white. But what I want to do is actually transform this one so it just sits in the middle. So I'm going to add a transformation node to this. So if I just select the wire and then click on transformation. So actually, just going to drag this in. Oops, wrong one, sorry. Work out why we're getting a problem here. I'll do it on this, and I'll do it by looking at the screen. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to essentially shrink this down. So that's what we can do with the Transform 2D node, but the problem is this is tiling, so we're not seeing any difference really. So what I need to do is switch that off. So we just go over into the tiling mode, just click on this little icon here, method of inheritance, and I'm going to set this to absolute. And what this allows me to do is actually go into the tiling now and switch the tiling off. So now you can see we have a transparency there. Let's bring this one down as well. Okay, so what we get there is something like this. I just drag this over, and I'm just going to put this into the base color just for now. So we have something like that. There we go. Just make sure there wasn't any line there. Okay. So I'm actually going to use this as a mask. So I'm just going to highlight this, I'm going to right click, and let's add a frame, and let's call this color mask. And then I've got to add my colors in here. So let's go to uniform color. I'm going to get my two colors. So I'm going to have my base color as deep red. I'll see how these look once they're on. I'm going to have my other color, have a yellowy orange. Okay. Then I'm going to use a blend node. And now I'm going to drag my mask across to blend those both together. Again, I can just right click on this. Let's just see what this looks like. And there we go. I'm going to add a bit of it's a bit uniform, these colours at the minute, so I'm going to add a bit of discoloration to this. So again, what I'm going to do is use one of my noise generators. And let's just use something like a black and white spots. Just going to blend. Now, I'm going to have a problem with this because we're trying to mix RGB color and grayscale information, or color and grayscale. So what we can do with this is actually just click on the wire, and we can add a gradient in this. And what the gradient will do is actually convert it. With a gradient, I'm just using it as a conversion. I'm not doing anything else with it. So I can press D just to dock that in, just to get it out of the way a little bit. Then if we go into this, I'm going to set the blend mode to a multiply. And I may just make this a bit more subtle. Again, let's just right click, drag this. Maybe have something like that. Okay. I might just go in and set this order on that. No, I don't want an overlay. Let's just try a... No, I think I'll stick with the multiply. What I may do is just add the levels in here. Just bring this down. Okay, maybe something like that. As a final thing, what I'm going to do is I have my ambient occlusion. I'm just going to, now normally with an Albedo map you wouldn't put any ambient occlusion on. We'd let that be done in the game engine. I'm just going to add a little bit on here actually, just for just to kind of stylize it a little bit. So as a final thing, I'm going to go in, add another blend node. Where has my blend mode gone? There you go. And I'm going to add the ambient occlusion map that I had. If I just click on the ambient occlusion, I can just change this to color. Grayscale color should work. No, okay. And let's try doing this with a gradient in there. Again, just pressing D to dock this. It seems to have, let's look, got a grayscale conversion. And I don't think I need both of these. No. Let me add the gradient in manually. Oh well, seems to be happy at that. Let me just try this one more time. Yeah, I thought it should work. I don't know why that was doing that, but yeah, we should be able to have changed the ambient occlusion to color information to be able to blend these two together. So now I'm just going to add that as a multiply and just make that a slight bit more subtle. So you can see it's just kind of adding, again, if I just drag this on, kind of adding a little bit of occlusion onto this. I might just go back to my mask a second. And just drag that out a little bit. That's maybe a bit too much. Okay, just to fine tune that a little bit. And so having the ambient occlusion just does help a little bit in seeing that. So let's finally just grab this. Again, let's just right click and add a frame to, make sure I've got these selected. Right click and add a frame. And let's call this color. So finally, I'm going to start adding these into my outputs. So my outputs were created when we created the substance. So we can plug in our color into our base color. We have our normal map. Oops. To our normal. We have our roughness. To our roughness map. For the metallic, this is a metallic object. So what I will do is I will just get a uniform color again. Just make sure this is black. And let's just plug that into there. Okay. And I'm also going to add an ambient occlusion node on top of this as well. So there's no ambient occlusion output set up. So what I can do is just go to the out to create another output on this. If I click here, we can click on add item, and then we can change this into an ambient occlusion. Let's just go in and give this a name. As an identifier. And what I can actually do is grab this ambient occlusion map from over here and drag that in. Okay, so that's all our maps on there. So if I just right click now, I can do a view outputs in 3D view, and that's now taking these from our outputs onto our object. Okay, so let's just save. I'm going to save all. Save this as oil barrel tut, and there we go. We have our quick texture, all procedural, so we can change this at any point. Ready to go. So what I'll do is I'll finish this tutorial here, and in the next tutorial we'll look at actually generating masks and adding some noise onto this.